Hello, welcome to Princeton University in Princeton, New Jersey, about an hour's away from New York City. Princeton is one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in the Ivy League schools, and is also one of the most competitive universities in the country. It's also my alma mater. This month, we'll be taking a close look at Princeton, its history, academic program, and student life. We'll be talking to professors, students, and members of the university community to find out more about Princeton and the way it was in the past and the way it is today. Right now, I'm standing in front of Nassau Hall, the oldest building here on campus.
When the lumps of Princeton gather anywhere, there's a place they think of longing to be there. It's the one and only.
Princeton University was founded in 1746. And Nassau Hall was built 10 years later to function as the center for all college activities. For about 50 years, until other facilities were built, students took classes, ate their meals, slept and studied here. Nassau Hall also played a significant part in American history. As the Battle of Princeton during the Revolutionary War, it changed hands 3 times with both British and American troops occupying the building. Today, Nassau Hall is still the most important building on campus. The office of the president of the university is here, and every year, graduation ceremonies take place on the front lawn. Tradition has it that while you can enter campus through the main gates, you can't leave campus through them until graduation day, or else you'll flunk out. This week, we're going to be looking at Princeton as an academic institution. We'll be talking to some professors to find out what gives Princeton its reputation for academic excellence. But before we get into the classroom, we're going to meet Princeton's spokesperson, Mr. Justin Harmon, to find out what it takes to become a Princetonian. Hello, Mr. Harmon. Thank you for joining us today. Behind us, there is a tiger on the front steps of Nassau Hall. Is that significant?
The tiger is Princeton's mascot and has been for the last 100 years or so. The colors of the tiger, orange and black, are the school's colors.
I see. And I guess some general questions about Princeton. How many students are presently enrolled in the undergraduate studies here?
There are 4,500 undergraduates enrolled, and they come from all 50 states in the United States and from 50 foreign countries, including some from Japan.
I see. And one general question, what is an Ivy League school?
The Ivy League, there are 8 schools that refer to themselves as the Ivy League, and they're all private research universities that sprung up on the East Coast of the United States. They tend to be among the oldest institutions in the country, built we refer to it as University Gothic architecture. There's a lot of ivy on these campuses, and thus the name Ivy League.
What are some of the differences, perhaps, between Harvard or Yale and Princeton?
That's an interesting question. There are a lot of differences. The main difference, I think, between Princeton and most other schools in the Ivy League is that its size. It's a relatively small school. Princeton, over time, has made very careful choices about which academic areas we intend to pursue. There's no law school, no business school here. We focus on the liberal arts and sciences, and carefully within the academic disciplines in such a way that we feel gives a very careful focus to what we're doing. What that also means is that we're able to maintain a much smaller scale. And one of the things that we offer to undergraduates, because we're a relatively small school, is the chance to work very closely with all faculty, with the senior faculty as well as with the junior faculty.
さて今月は東部の名門大学の一つ 8つあります IB リーグ校のそのうちの一つでありますところのプリンストン大学を詳しくご紹介するということになりまして、この大学は初めはCollege of New Jersey という名前で、場所も今日のプリンストンではございませんでした。1746年創設ということでありますから18世紀の半ば頃、その意味では古い大学ですね。やがてずっと19世紀までこの College of New Jersey という名前が続きますが、1896年にプリンストン大学という名前が定着をする。そして今日に及んでいるということであります。学部生が4600人しかいないという少数精鋭主義、学科の数も科学を中心とし、それに一部人文一般科学を人文学を入れまして、いわゆる総合大学を目指すのではなくて、学問分野も限られたものの中にエリートを集めようということで各界に春才を送り込んでおります。まず第一週は学問研究の場として教育の場としてのプリンストンというテーマでございますが、この後ですね、天文素粒子論ですね、この分野でもって世界的な名声を誇っていらっしゃいますグロース教授の教室にカメラが入ることができました。そして親しく先生のお話を聞くことができます。あとは美術の分野、美術批評家の清水教授、日系の方でいらっしゃいます。そのお話も聞くことになります。
To be specific, the problem we want to address is the following. We're given
We're here today with Professor David Gross, a very well-respected professor at Princeton University. Good morning, Professor.
Morning.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the research work that you're involved here at the university?
Well, I'm a what is called a particle theorist. I am a theorist, so that I don't do experiments. I try to come up with theories, and the area that I do research in explores the fundamental structure of matter and the forces between matter. The basic laws that govern the fundamental structure of everything around us.
Lately, there's been a lot of talk about science education in the United States and its weaknesses. As a professor, a physics professor here at the university, what are your thoughts about the current state of science education?
Well, it's interesting to compare science education in the United States and Japan, for example. We, I think, do very badly in high school education, at least as far as I can tell from my children's high school experience. But we do very well in university education. Compared to Japan, I think we do much worse in high school and much better in universities, particularly in graduate studies. We get many Japanese graduate students at Princeton who come here to benefit from what is probably still the best universities in the world.
Why do you think that Princeton has the best physics department in the country? That is what I have heard, perhaps better than MIT. And I'm sure that you must have many foreign students that come here.
Well, it's nice to hear that it has that reputation. I mean, I think so, but partly it's a matter of tradition and luck. A good university is based on a good faculty and a good administration and enough financial support to keep the effort going. Princeton has a long tradition of excellence in physics, particularly, over many years, which we try very hard to keep up.
You mentioned earlier about funding for scientific research. You yourself have received a great number of fellowships and grants from the private sector. What do you think about government and private sector funding for scientific research?
Well, it's essential, of course, to carry out research. In the United States, again, I think we're very fortunate that there are both private and public sources of funds. The grants or prizes that I've received from private sources are very nice they of course don't really make up for public support. And theorists are cheap, but experimental science is very expensive, and really only the government can support that to the degree which is necessary. In the United States, we complain a lot about not getting enough funds for research, and that, of course, is true. On the other hand, it could be worse, and in many places in the world, it is much worse. We, of course, believe that it is a very important task for society to support even the research which at the moment appears to be totally pure and have no direct application to the problems of society. We're convinced that in the long run this will benefit even directly society, and even if it didn't, it is essential for the cultural development of mankind, and it's important to understand, for us to understand the structure of the world around us. So we are not ashamed of asking for money from whoever can pay.
So you do feel some pressure, or a lot of pressure from the government to perhaps do research for defense-related?
No, not at all. Not at all, especially not nowadays, but not even before. No, not really.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt you during your work. So what year are you?
I'm a junior.
And what is your major?
I'm an English major.
And how many hours in the library do you spend per week?
I would say maybe 12 or 14.
How long is the library open for? How late?
It's open till 11:30, 11:45 most nights.
Are students here until that hour?
Definitely. And one room, the reserve room, is usually open later, and some people stay there even past 11:30.
What were you just reading?
Little Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream. It's really the first Shakespeare book I've ever read, and I'm really enjoying it.
Has the 3 years here been difficult for you?
Yeah, I don't know if they've been as much difficult academically as they have as far as other things, just getting adjusted to, kind of doing things on my own and, moving away from home. But it's been difficult, but it's also been enjoyable. I really feel as though I've grown up a lot during the last 3 years, and I really feel as though I've learned a lot outside of the classroom as well.
How much is the workload for each course?
Well, about 100, I'd say about 125, 150 pages a week is typical, and you try to get most of it done. You can't always get most of it done. I mean, I'm sure you've been a student. You know that.
So what happens when you haven't read a book and a professor asks you a question about a specific reading?
Run. No. Generally, the way the precepts work, the discussions work, is you come in when you want to, and so. Generally, you can be quiet and sort of be in the background if you don't want to be if you don't want to be noticed.
Is it really difficult here to spend, do you really have to spend a lot of hours working in order to make a good grade here?
I think to make a very good grade you do, but my general impression is that if you put in the right amount of time, you do the reading, you'll get a mediocre grade, and it's harder to do very, very well.
How many all-nighters have you pulled?
In the last 3 years, maybe 20.
I'm standing here today in front of the Princeton University Art Museum, which just completed a 4-year renovation plan. The museum contains important artworks from the periods of ancient, medieval, Oriental, and American. It also has important works by such artists as Edward Monet, Cézanne, and Vincent van Gogh. Classes are often held inside the museum so that students can look at objects at first hand. But the Princeton Art Museum collection doesn't end there. Walking around campus, one can't help but look at the sculptures scattered all around campus by such artists as Picasso, Henry Moore, and Isamu Noguchi. I'm here today with Professor Yoshiaki Shimizu, the chairperson of the Art and Archaeology Department, and a gentleman who also was my professor when I was here at Princeton. Hello, Professor Shimizu.
Well, glad to see you back in a very different context.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your personal background, where you were educated, and how long you have been a professor here at Princeton.
I'm from Japan originally. I came in 1953 at the age of 17 and did most of my secondary school and college in America. And I have been at Princeton both as a student and as a professor. As a student, I began my career here in 1968 and finished my degree in 1973. And then I left Princeton in 75 and then worked at different places like Berkeley and for 4 years and Smithsonian Freer Gallery as a curator for 5 years. And I came back in 84. So this is my 6th year at Princeton.
What do you teach specifically here at the university?
I teach Japanese art history, mostly of the medieval period, that is to say from about 13th century to 16th century, focusing mostly on painting.
Do you see a difference between Japanese and American art history students in attitude or curiosity or appreciation?
I think so. Basically, for American students are studying Japanese art without really having a background knowledge of Japanese history. Therefore, certain things that the Japanese, let's say, college students or graduate students assume can't be, or we cannot assume, in other words, that whatever Japanese students take for granted can be assumed to be a part of American students' knowledge. So there is, I would say there's more demand in teaching Japanese art to American students because we have to put the art historical problems in the context of larger history and social history, cultural history. So in that sense, I think we probably are doing more work than my colleagues in Japan, trying to explain. I mean, Japanese students in Japan don't have to have Japan explained, but we have to explain Japan in addition to Japanese paintings. So in that sense, I think sometimes I find our task to be quite daunting. Yeah.
さて、初めのグロース教授の授業をですね、学生も真剣に聞いておりました。伺ったお話によりますと、いろいろと専門的なお話も出てまいりますが、プリンストンのようなレベルの高い教育を維持するための3条件というのを挙げてらっしゃいますね。ファカルティ、教授陣が高度の研究教育能力を持っていること。良きアドミニストレーション、これはまあ職員を含めた行政面。それから3つ目に上がってきたものがファンドの力ですね。これは資金面でありますね。特に物理学などをやるについては実験は大変お金をかかる。セオリティカルな面はそれほどでもないけれどもやっぱり資金が必要だということを言って学者の言葉としてこれが出てくるということでありますね。さて清水教授のご意見によりますと、アメリカの学生に日本美術を教えるためには日本の学生であれば一枚の絵そのものを話して十分に通じるが、一枚の絵の背後にある社会的な問題、歴史的な問題、これはアメリカには一切合切全部話さないと通じにくい、そこが大変だということであったようであります。さあ2週目3週目と続きますが、プリンストンで参ります。お楽しみに。
Hello everybody, we're here again at Princeton University. This week we're going to be taking a look at student life here on campus. If you think that student life here at Princeton is all work and no play, you're going to be in for a big surprise. No matter how busy students may be, they always find time for some extracurricular activity. This may include writing for a newspaper, participating on an athletic team, or simply just hanging out with friends. There are approximately 200 student organizations on campus, some serious, some strenuous, and some just plain fun. This week, we're going to be taking a look at what some students do when they're not in the library studying or in their room sleeping. I'm standing in Rockefeller College, named after John D. Rockefeller III. The buildings all around me are built in the Gothic style, and it's where the students live in singles, doubles, and quad rooms. Most of the dormitories were built over 80 years ago, and some of the rooms still have working fireplaces in them. All the students at Rockefeller College eat at Madison Hall, which is, in my opinion, the most beautiful Gothic style dining room on campus. So why don't we go in and take a look? Hello, Mr. Wilder. Could you introduce yourself to us, please?
Hi, I'm Charlie Wilder, manager of Rockefeller Maddie. It's the largest dining facility at Princeton University for food services.
How long have you been working here?
I've been working at Rocky Maddie starting my third year. I've been working in food services at the university for 12.
About how many students do you serve per day here?
On the average, between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we serve about 2,800 meals a day.
Is there a certain set menu that you serve?
We have menus that are programmed through the dietitian and the executive chef's office, and we sit on menu boards and we go over all the items on the menu, and we try to take some constructive criticism and suggestions from students, and all the units serve the same menus throughout the month.
And how about the students? Do you have any student workers that help you prepare the foods?
No, most of the student staff we have are in the maintenance and utility. They help with dishes, cleanup, serving on the line. No, most of the food preparation, all the food preparation, I should say, is done by professional staff.
What do you think about students at Princeton students?
On the whole, I enjoy them. They're very interesting, and it's quite a mix of a lot of different international nationalities. And one of the things I enjoy a lot is the early freshman arrivals, the international students that come over from Europe early in fall season.
And also, have you had any problems here in terms of food fights, perhaps?
None at all.
How's the food?
Well, the food here is rather repetitious, as they have about a 1-week cycle that repeats, but it's edible.
What are you having right now?
Right now I'm enjoying a rice concoction and also a salad that I made from the fixings at their DFS salad bar.
How many times a week do you eat here?
20, but if I had the financial means to go other places, I would probably do so.
What other places on campus are there to eat? Perhaps on Nassau Street?
There are a lot of pizza places, delivery places. There are a lot of delivery places.
Are they mostly pizza?
Pizza and sandwiches, subs, hoagies.
How much allowance do you all have?
I don't have an allowance. I mean, I have some money my dad gave me, but that's it.
Do you work here on campus to make some extra money?
Not me, but some people do.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I deliver the New York Times and the Daily Prince and the USA Today.
Where do you deliver these to?
Just on campus to all the student subscribers.
And also, how much money do you make doing that?
Make $10 to $12 a route, depending on how long the route is. And they take anywhere from an hour to like an hour and a half.
So how early in the morning do you have to get up?
About 6:45. That's kind of a disadvantage of the route.
Could you tell me what year you all are?
I'm class of '93. I'm a sophomore.
You know, there are a lot more guys here than girls, I guess, the ratio. What's the ratio now?
It's like, is it 46? And I don't know. I don't really know.
Our class is pretty close, actually, I think. Like, it's pretty close to even. But in general, it's like 60-40, I think.
What sort of things do you do after class?
Sleep. I don't know. Study, sleep. Like after class on the weekend, we like go out to the clubs and have fun. You just sit around and talk a lot. I don't know. I've spent a lot of time just sitting and talking to friends and
Do you go to movies or like discos or bars on the street?
There's enough going on campus that you never really leave the campus. There are enough parties and bands and stuff that come on campus to perform for Princeton that you really don't have to go anywhere.
How do you like living away from home?
Well, I'm from California, so it's really far away, and it can be kind of hard sometimes.
How many times a year do you get to go home?
Usually 2 or 3 times a year, depending on what we're doing for family vacations and whether my parents come to visit me or not.
さてご覧のように、学問研究としてのプリンストンという第1週目のテーマの後は学生生活というわけでありますが、学生生活といってもいろんな局面があります。真っ先に取り上げましたのは食べることってんですから通俗的なアプローチとも思えますけれども、しかし若い人にとっては食べることは最大の関心事の一つじゃないでしょうか。この日本では例えば学食などといいまして、学生食堂の簡略形だそうでありますけれども、その雰囲気とは随分違いますね。例えばこのロックフェラーコレッジのマディと愛称で呼ばれておりますマディソンホールですね。そこに学生が集まってまいります。ここにはプロの料理人、材料を集めたり処理するのもみんな学生のアルバイトっていうのはお掃除をしたりなんかするようでありますけれども、調理その他は専門家がやると。そして1週間単位にメニューがくるくる変わって、そして、この同じパターンを繰り返すこともあるのが不満だけれどもなどと学生が言っておりますね。何でも学内にある。第一 95%、なんと在学生の 95% が学内に寝起きをしている。寮生中心の大学なんですね。ですから何でも学内で揃うので外に行かなくても十分間に合ってしまう。外へ行く気がしない。そのあたりが日本の大学の普通の在り方と一味二味違うように思われます。さあ後半も覗いてみましょ
う。Princeton is made up of 5 residential colleges: Butler, Wilson, Forbes, Maddie, and Rockefeller. As a freshman, or as it is now called, a fresh person, you are assigned to one of these colleges. Each college has its own dining room, lounge, TV room, game room, and computer room. For 2 years, freshmen and sophomores live in the dormitories and eat in the dining room of their college, along with approximately 500 other students. This smaller number of students helps to ease the transition to university life. I'm in 101 Holder, a dormitory room in Rockefeller College. It happens to be my brother's room, Seiji Suzuki. Hi, Seiji.
Hi.
Could you introduce these guys right here?
Yeah, these are my roommates. This is Rick Hartley. He's from Maine. This is Charles Herrick. He's from, I think, Baltimore. And this is Dave Morrow, and he's from Michigan.
How's dorm life been so far?
It was excellent. It's great.
You have a pretty elaborate room here with a bar and lights and lots of couches. Who put together all this stuff?
Well, the interior decorating was done by Dave Morrow, and the poster selection, I think we all did together. But the fine construction work, the tables, the bar, I think that was Charles and Dave's work.
You must have a lot of parties here with this sort of elaborate room that you have. There are a lot of girls also coming over?
Oh yeah, lots of good. We really haven't had a big party yet. We're I think this weekend, guys, we're gonna have this Saturday night we're gonna have a big party, and it should be fun. We're pretty psyched.
Are your neighbors girls?
Unfortunately not. We have a room of freshman guys next to us, and then one room of girls. We'd like more girls, of course.
You all have a lot of girlfriends. Do they clean up the room and do your laundry for you?
Sure. No, actually, they don't. We have some girlfriends, but not as many as we, just friends. They come over and they hang out, but we'll get lucky sooner or later on.
Do you go out on dates?
Well, not specifically dates. A lot of times we just go to the streets of the clubs and meet people and meet girls, but every once in a while we take a girl out to dinner.
How many times a year do you get to go back home?
I go back home twice a year for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, and usually if I didn't play sport in the spring, I'd go home in the spring also at Easter, but since I play lacrosse, I'm here from, when we get back from Christmas break, it was about mid-January all the way till May.
How rigorous is lacrosse practice?
It's extremely rigorous. We like right now we're in our fall season, and we do a lot of running and a lot of weightlifting, and our fall season, or our official season, can't officially start until February 1st. And right now it's just preseason training. It's very tough.
Morning and afternoon practices?
Well, we are required to get up every morning and run at about 8 o'clock. We run about 4 to 8 miles a day, and then in the afternoon we have weightlifting sessions.
This is a university store known as the U Store here on campus. The U Store sells just about everything a student needs, from computer paper, textbooks, clothes, groceries, and of course, Princeton paraphernalia. WPRB stands for Princeton Radio Broadcasting Service, and it's a student-run radio station here on campus. It's one of the largest college commercial radio stations in the country. And with me is Dave Mills, a senior here at Princeton, and is the program director. Hi, Dave.
Hi. My job as program director is mostly to oversee the air sound, to make sure people do shows, also to maintain the quality of the air sound. I try to listen to people's shows, give them pointers on things they can do to improve, how they can incorporate more types of music and sound into their shows. So I'm sort of a quality overseer in some ways. Also, if someone forgets to do a show, I have to fill in for them too, even early in the morning.
What kind of music does WPRB play, and who is your audience?
We try to play all kinds of music, really. We don't have a lot of listeners on campus. A lot of our listeners are in the surrounding area. We have 17,000 watts of power, which is quite a bit for a college station. So we broadcast into Philadelphia, onto the New Jersey shore, and up near New York City. So we have a lot of listeners in the surrounding area. For those types of people, we have all kinds of music, from classical to jazz to what we call alternative rock, college rock and roll. And we also have a lot of specialty shows, from rap to reggae to folk to country to blues, just about anything really that we think is interesting to a lot of people. We try to get on the air. We really try to offer about anything we can to people.
And how many hours a day do you broadcast?
We broadcast, depending on the day, from 20 to 23 hours a day.
So students are here just about all hours of the night?
That's right. We have people on the graveyard shift from 3 to 5 a.m. in the morning. That's what we have for training for people in their first semester of broadcasting. We like to have them on when not a lot of people are listening, so they're actually broadcasting, but they're not in a high-pressure primetime slot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm standing in front of the offices of the Daily Princetonian, the student-run newspaper that publishes 5 times a week. The Daily Princetonian covers campus news, sports, weather, as well as national news. So let's go in and take a look at students at work. Hello, Alexandra. Could you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. My name is Alexandra Bradner, and I'm a senior at Princeton, and I'm the chair of the Daily Princetonian.
Okay, the Daily Princetonian publishes 5 days a week, so you must be really, really busy. How many staff members do you have here?
We have about 70 staff members, and it's divided between a photo staff and a sports staff and a news staff, and then we have a whole entire other half of the paper that deals with business, selling advertisements and things like that.
How much does the paper sell for, and where can students buy it?
It's 20 cents a copy if you buy it at the newsstand or a store, but most of the students on campus purchase a subscription at the beginning of the school year, and then it's delivered to their door from then on.
Okay, and are most of your writers juniors and seniors, or do you have freshman writers as well?
Most of the writers start as first-year students, and that's a little Prince policy we have. We don't call people freshmen anymore, and we use the gender-neutral first-year student. So most of our writers are first-year. They start as first-year students, and then they, after a year on the Prince, they become staff writers, and then senior writers, and then they join the managing board. So we have all 4 years represented on the staff.
Do a lot of the staff writers later choose to be involved in the journalism field after graduation?
Several do and several don't. Because of the nature of the university, a lot of the students go on to graduate school. Some go on to professional schools. Others will do year-long internship programs, and some do become journalists. So I think it's like any other kind of university. People choose to go into all fields. We have our 2 managing editors this year are going to be journalists when they're done. So this is kind of Princeton's School of Journalism. So.
How about yourself?
I don't know what I'm going to... I think I'm going to go to graduate school in philosophy, which is my major. So,
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
After class and early in the mornings before classes begin, Princeton athletes are out practicing. Approximately 60% of the students here participate in some sport, be it baseball, football, lacrosse, tennis, or golf. Of all these sports, however, crew, perhaps, is considered the most Ivy League sport. Rowing is an extremely grueling experience. Crew team members practice rigorously throughout the winter season. During the spring season, they compete against such schools as Harvard, Yale, and Oxford, and sometimes even Keio University of Tokyo. Hi, is this the lightweight or the heavyweight team?
This is the heavyweight freshman team.
So have you rowed before then?
Yeah, I rowed some in high school.
How was practice?
Good. It's hard, but I think it'll all be worth it when we start rowing in the spring.
How many hours a day do you practice?
It usually averages about an hour and a half.
Even when it's really cold, you're out on the water?
When the lake freezes over, we have the tanks and we row indoors, and we work out on the rowing machines, and then we row on the water if there's no ice.
この大学のですね、放送局といいましても全て学生が運営しております。企画立案から取材から放送、実際のアナウンスメントまで全部学生であります。それも4年生ばかりではなくて1年生から参加しておりますね。こうしてその放送するワット数もかなりのものでありますし、ですからキャンパスの内部だけではなくて、むしろ数の上から言いますとキャンパスの周辺部分の一般住民、ニューヨークのあたりまで放送が届いていて、マニアの視聴者がいるということのようですね。新聞の方もプリンストニアン、これも有名でありまして、70人のスタッフが編集取材に当たっているということでありますね。これが週5日日刊になっているということでありますから、日本の学生新聞週刊とか月に一遍とかっていうのとかなり密度が違うようであります。すべての学生がこういう学生活動の後ジャーナリズムの分野に入っていくとは限らないようでありまして、哲学の専攻だけれども今だけ新聞を編集してるとか今だけアナウンスをやってるとかっていう、そのあたりが贅沢な学生生活の一時期の活動ということでしょうか。さあ来週もまた楽しみに見ていただきましょう。 今週はですね、少し骨っぽいところといきましょう。そしてこの大学が誇っております弁論部ですね。弁論部でもいわゆるスピーチじゃございませんで、ディベートという集中討議、この弁論部は大変長い伝統を持っておりまして、18世紀からやっておりますけれども、二手に分かれ、ある特定の命題の賛成派と反対派、この急にそこでサイコロを転がす、あるいはじゃんけんをする、コインを投げる形で賛成反対に分かれまして、自分の与えられた方の側の意見を主張し始めます。一般的には2人の人、まず最初に準備したスピーチを述べ、反対側がそれに対して急遽相手の言葉を聞いて反論を述べる。3人目がまた賛成側ですね。そして4人目が急遽また反対意見を述べる。その4人が組み合わさった形で優劣を決めるという形です。さあ聞いてみましょう。
Hello everybody, we're still here at Princeton University. For those of you who are just joining us this week, we've been taking a close look at one of the Ivy League's most prestigious universities this month. This week we'll be watching a debate put on by members of the American Whig Theosophic Society. Founded in 1760 by Aaron Burr and James Madison, this debating society is the largest student organization on campus and is also the oldest debating society in the nation. Tonight's debate, which will be taking place behind me, is on the topic of Japan-American defense relations.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks for coming to tonight's debate on the topic, Japan should assume the full burden of stationing United States troops on its soil. The four speakers tonight will be, for the proposition side, Stacey Storr and Sean Halbert. For the opposition side, Matt Bodie and Harold Golden.
Thank you. Tonight, what we've been called upon to debate is whether or not Japan should assume the full financial burden of stationing United States troops on its soil. When we consider this, we have to realize what an unusual situation we're in with regard to United States-Japanese military relations, where we have a situation stemming from World War II, a situation that was far more suited to the times at that point than it is to current situations and current economic standings between the nations. At that point, Japan could not assume responsibility for its own defense, but times have changed, and that is no longer true. Japan, as any nation in the world, should be able to handle and assume responsibility for its own defense. There are two distinct ways that this could happen. They could either do this by beefing up the self-defense forces and strengthening their own forces, or by paying for the United States troops' defensive functions on their soil. What we're going to argue today is that they're far better off to pay for the United States troops, that's a far more economical way of providing their defense than they are to build up the self-defense forces. First, there are two reasons that I'd like to argue they shouldn't build up the self-defense forces, and secondly, I'd like to turn to why it's important for them to fund the United States military there. The first issue when we deal with the self-defense forces is the questionable issue of the constitutionality of the self-defense forces in Japan. It's very difficult to say that your entire defense should rest on a body which the state government is not sure should exist, which the Japanese government is not sure is actually constitutionally allowed. The second danger of increasing the self-defense forces is the original problem that they were intended to handle. The original problem that Japan set up self-defense forces rather than a regular standing army was to avoid the perception of their neighbors as becoming overly aggressive. If Japan were to assume responsibility for its own defense by beefing up the self-defense forces, then that perception of their neighbors would be in danger of worsening. Now, let's turn to the other alternative, the alternative of stating that they should assume the responsibility for paying for the United States troops. First, we'll look at the question of the economics of that, and then we'll look at the responsibility issue. The economics of it is not really the issue that this should be decided upon, because if we look at it truthfully, either nation could afford to pay for this. It's not a question of, at this point, who can afford this defense, nor is it a question of how would it be done if it were to be done. It can be phased in over a long time, or it could happen in the next year or so. But whatever is happening, what we're determining is who should bear that responsibility and how the defense should be paid for. So when we look at that, we look at then three main reasons that it's in Japan's interest to do this. The first one is that if they do not, then it is likely that with the changing world situation, the United States will choose not to remain, keeping their military bases there or as strong as they are. Because with the Cold War situation warming up, there is less need for the United States to keep its troops there, but there is still as much need for Japan to defend itself. The second reason is that it's far more effective militarily and economically for Japan to do that than for it to start from basically scratch to allow the self-defense forces to take over where the United States military forces currently are. The machines are built, the soldiers are there and trained. Yet, if the self-defense forces were to take over, all of these things would have to start over. Economically and time-wise, that's difficult for the country to do. And the last reason I'd like to talk about is that in the face of relations between Japan and the United States, this is a rather cheap way for Japan to make a goodwill gesture in face of the increasing economic tensions between the two nations. That when we compare the cost of this economically to the cost of some of the measures that American government is considering, this is a far more effective, far more cost-effective way, as well as being far fairer in the military realm, for Japan to make a goodwill gesture towards its neighbor across the seas.
We of the opposition would agree with the government that, indeed, the setup as it is now is more suited towards World War II. And yet this side of the House would have you continue to follow in this anachronistic system, this system where Japan must rely on the U.S. for its defense forces. We say no. We say U.S. troops are there to serve U.S. interests. And what Japan should do instead is work on defending itself, and not do what this side of the House would have you do, but rather work on building up the self-defense forces in order that Japan can one day defend itself and no longer have to rely on the U.S., which is looking out for U.S. interests. Our first point of the day is that U.S. troops serve U.S. interests. Why are the U.S. troops over there? Yes, to defend Japan. But they are also there in strategic military bases for the protection of the entire Pacific Basin, for the protection of the entire Far East. It's to guard against U.S. expansion, to protect the U.S., help U.S. security. The bases are under U.S. control. Paying for troops will not change that. What Japan will be doing is paying for foreign troops to be stationed on its soil. Is this the best situation for Japan? Most likely not. What Japan should do instead is work on building its own defense forces. Right now, Japan pays 40% of all of the U.S. troops stationed in Japan. This is up from 31% in 1987. As you can see, the U.S. is putting steady pressure on Japan to keep paying more and more for the U.S. presence there. So what should Japan do? Keep paying more and more to the U.S.? No. Japan should start on its own, should start to protect its own interests, which moves us to our second point, that the troops in Japan should be there to serve Japanese interests. Now they say there's a problem with constitutionality. We would agree. This is a relic from World War II. This is an anachronism. Japan is not the big threat to that entire region that many considered it once was. If Japan is going to defend itself, certainly no other nation would have a problem with that. The old Constitution allows for a defensive force, and this is what we think Japan should concentrate on. Japan does not want an offensive force. It wants a defensive force. And the self-defensive forces, if built up, would be there to defend Japan. They would not be there to serve U.S. interests. Japan cannot rely on the U.S. in the future, as this side of the House said. Even if Japan was paying the full amount, the United States could one day say, well, we no longer want to be here. You don't have to pay us anymore, but bye-bye. If Japan instead decides to start building up its own forces, it has the independence and the ability to control these forces as it thinks it should. If the U.S. wants to use Japan to defend the entire Pacific Ocean, that's fine. But the U.S. should pay for that if the U.S. wants to do that. Japan should pay for what it needs, which is defense. Right now, it's paying 40%. This side of the House wants the Japanese government to pay the entire 100% of the bill. We say no. We say, Japan, pay what you need to pay for your own livelihood, for your own defense. Stop relying on the U.S. and start building up your own independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What this debate has come down to now is not Japan bearing the economic burden, because either way Japan is going to be paying. But the question is where the money goes. The opposition has told you, in spite of our warnings, that what Japan should do is to beef up, spend more money on, increase the power of the self-defense forces, the Nhk from the 1950s. However, they ignore our two important reasons that we tell you that this cannot be done. First is the issue of constitutionality. The United States is not the actor who is saying that this is unconstitutional. It is the Japanese, half of the Japanese, or there's a division in Japan as to whether or not this is constitutional. This is not a United States imperialist notion that we are telling Japan what to do. As I understand it, the military and many of politicians are divided. The military wants to increase the self-defense forces, and yet many politicians and many of the people, in fact 60%, are saying that they do not want to increase it and they think it is unconstitutional. For that reason, the self-defense force would be extremely fragile, precarious, and anyone who has a defense force should want a strong defense force, not one that is likely to be extra-constitutional at best. The second reason we give you is that they will be perceived as overly aggressive. The opposition tells you, but they aren't aggressive. But that is not the issue here. The issue is perception. If the neighbors, and the neighbors have already made themselves clear, feel that Japan is beefing up its army, then there is nothing you can do to tell someone that that is wrong. I would give you the example of Iraq. Iraq may say these forces are defensive and we will not attack, but who knows how far you can take it. Perception is key, not intention. Now their point, though, they say that this is a United States venture, and since we are benefiting, we should be the ones who are bearing the cost. However, they ignore the fact that both are benefiting. Japan and the United States benefit from this venture. Now, we're right now in a treaty of mutual cooperation with Japan. Mutual cooperation, what should that mean? That means we each cooperate. The United States is providing a very valuable resource, and that is a military, a strong, mature, experienced military that the self-defense forces cannot claim to have, simply for the reasons we have told you before, because they are scared to make it too big for the reasons we give you. In response to this, Japan can provide the money. Now, right now, America has a very bad situation with the deficit, and we also have a terrible situation with calling up reserves. Soldiers are not something you can find anywhere. Soldiers are not something you can just call up. They are a very valuable resource. The United States is providing the resource, and Japan is providing the cost. That is a mutual operation agreement. Finally, we tell you this is a goodwill venture. We tell you Japan will benefit in all ways that America will benefit. Since both parties are benefiting, then surely both parties must bear the cost. United States will send much-needed troops, and Japan will pay for them. Thank you.
Good evening. The question we're about to address tonight has a lot more to do than just the relationship between two countries. It has to do with the future. The future not just of a country called Japan, but of the citizens, the individuals. And we've really had no discussion of the individual effect of what we're talking about tonight. What does it mean to say that Japan should take the entire burden for the forces there? The government side here, the proposing side, would have you believe that that means merely, well, to pay the United States forces to protect their homeland. But it means more than that. It means also that they would have to pay for the United States troops to defend the entire region, because the United States has already said in a document called the General Accounting Office Report to the Chairman, Committee on Armed Services, to the House of Representatives, they said the United States keeps their presence to maintain a base structure for regional contingency and to deter Soviet aggression in the Far East. So these are also things that Japan is going to be paying for, that this side of the House today has never once acknowledged, never once truthfully brought up to you. They have also told you today that it's not a matter of economics. Not a matter of economics when the Japanese have made a 5-year plan and a 19.4 trillion yen outlay in order to pay for assuming the cost of U.S. troops. There are 123 million Japanese. We're talking about, over a 5-year period, 300,000 yen per citizen. And that's not just per citizen who can pay, but it also has to do just per citizen. Think about the families who are going to have to pay for that. The families who are not going to be able to pay for that car, for that capital outlay they want to make down the line. Those are things they're going to have to put off. This is not purely a philosophical debate that we can make here in a vacuum. But we must also address the arguments that have been made here today. They tell you that we must remain in an anachronistic setup, one which says there was a constitution constructed 45 years ago by an invading force, and we should remain by that. They have harped on the issue of constitutionality. They have told you numerous times it's constitutionally questionable. What I would ask you today is, should that document be the thing on which we should base relationships in the future? It is an anachronism. It is also an anachronism to say that Japan is an aggressive force threatening its neighbors. I think China is pretty safe knowing Japan's right around the corner. I think most of the countries in the area are safe. You can't just throw up an analogy like saying, it's like Iraq, and expect everyone to go, ooh. You have to assume that there are real geopolitical realities that you have to deal with. And the second argument that was never dealt with, that my partner brought up that is essential, is we must, in the future, rely upon the United States to pay for the defense of Japan. What happens if down the line, as the Prime Minister said in her first speech, the United States might not remain? That was their words, not ours. Then there is a country that is defenseless. There is a country that could deal with the problems themselves by making their own armies. We ask you to move into the future and not remain with the anachronism of the past. We beg to oppose.
昔から縦板に水っていうのは流暢な言葉の使い方の例としてよく語られますけれども、まさにそんな感じがいたしました。このディベートっていうのはスピーチと違いまして、特に各チーム、つまり賛成側の2人目、反対側の2人目は相手の賛成論、相手の反対論を聞いて、直ちにそれに対して反論を加えるという意味で、相手の言ってる時にメモを取ることはできますが、あらかじめ用意をされたスピーチができないというところに本当の頭脳とそれから弁舌の腕の差異が見せ合うことができるということでありますね。これは本日は一種のモックといいまして模擬ディベートでありますけれども、本当の他校との他流試合になりますとアンパイアが出てジャッジされると、優劣が決まるということでありますから、厳しい頭脳の訓練ということですね。さて内容的には、この日本駐留の米軍の費用を日本が全面的に肩代わりすべきであるという命題に対しての賛否両論のぶつかり合いでございました。とても内容的にはアメリカ人の学生がここまで日本の現実を知っているのかという感じでありますけれども、つまり自衛隊の合憲性、コンスティテューショナリティということを言っておりますですね。自衛隊の合憲性に問題がある、憲法上、国民のかなりの部分が、その疑義を抱いておるならば自衛隊を増強、つまりビーフアップという英語で言いますね。ビーフアップすることには問題があるし、そういたしますと近隣諸国の日本脅威論がまたぞろ頭をもたげてくるであろう。だから米軍の駐留を仰いで費用を分担せよということ。反対側の方は、いや米軍が日本に駐留するのは極東地域全体の防衛であるから、日本専守ということであるならば自衛隊を増強すべきで、アメリカを頼ってはいけないということのようでありました。
this is our final week at Princeton University. This month we've been focusing on the academic and student life at one of the nation's most competitive universities. This week we'll be taking a look at one of Princeton's most famous alumni, F. Scott Fitzgerald, class of 1917. Fitzgerald, who went to school here when it was still all male, is considered one of America's greatest writers. This week we're going to be looking at the Princeton of Fitzgerald's day. We're going to be going to some of the clubs that he belonged to, talking to an English professor about Fitzgerald's literary work, and going to Firestone Library to look at the university collection of Fitzgerald's papers.
Hello, Professor Lutz. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to first ask you, F. Scott Fitzgerald is known as America's greatest writer about the jazz age. Could you tell us a little bit about the 1920s?
Well, when America came out of the First World War as a major power, and the economy in this country was heating up every year, the country went into a kind of frenzy of expansion during the 1920s. And with this economy expanding, there was a renaissance or a renaissance of American literature. And when you think about Fitzgerald, you think of him as being representative of that rich decade in American literature, which saw the introduction of Hemingway, for example, of Faulkner, of O'Neill the dramatist. And the centers of activity were really both New York and Paris. And many of these writers, like Fitzgerald, shuttled back and forth between being an expatriate in Paris and a native writer on the American scene.
This Side of Paradise, that's the first novel I think of when I think about Fitzgerald. It's his first novel that he wrote about Princeton. Do you think Fitzgerald's status as an author and also as a social figure is related to the fact that he went to school here?
I think that was certainly true at the beginning of his career, when the Ivy League colleges, such as Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, were much more important in the American social scene than they are now. If you go back to the New York Times, for example, of the period when Fitzgerald was an undergraduate, activities on the Princeton campus made the front page. Social events here were national news. Football weekends were treated as national events. And therefore to be a prominent figure on the Princeton scene, as Fitzgerald was also to be a prominent figure on the national scene. And when his first novel, which is not nearly his best, of course, This Side of Paradise came out, it, in a sense, set the popular image of what Ivy League college life was like for the 1920s.
So the Ivy Leagues were considered this sort of...
Privileged.
Privileged.
Very much so. And very social, combining intellectual interests with social interests. And the Princeton clubs, for example, were almost extensions of the social scene, let's say, of Philadelphia, of New York, and students moved easily in and out of Princeton to the parties and debutante balls in the major cities on the East Coast. It was a different world.
Yes.
And for people living, let's say, in the Midwest, this was a kind of glamorous Eastern world.
Right.
For Fitzgerald himself, coming from the Midwest, it had that glamour.
A lot of his writings, Fitzgerald's writings, the theme is the migration from the West to the East.
Absolutely.
The social advancement. Is that reflective of his own personal background, his sort of, let's say, insecurities about his background?
I think very much so. As you know, he was born and brought up in St. Paul, in Minnesota, in the heart of the Midwest, with a rather ne'er-do-well intellectual father, a very respectable mother. And from an early age, when he went off to preparatory school, he thought of the East Coast, and especially Princeton, as representing a kind of sophistication that had been kept from him when he was younger. And I think coming to Princeton was almost wish fulfillment on his part. And to a certain extent, he single-handedly remade the university through his fiction into something not quite like the reality of it.
Well, he describes Princeton men as slender, keen, and romantic, and the campus as being a first-rate country club. Do you think that's still true here today?
Well, as a graduate, you know that it's not true. I think there are vestiges of it today. We're actually in a building which is a vestige of it, Cottage Club, Fitzgerald's old club. But obviously Princeton has been totally transformed over the last 50 or 60 years. In Fitzgerald's time, there were no women students. We now have 45% women. It now represents all the various social classes and ethnic backgrounds in this country. In Fitzgerald's time, it was very much a white, Protestant, Anglo-Saxon East Coast bastion. It was, in some sense, a spacious country club in which you could be both an intellectual and a social figure.
I understand that Fitzgerald didn't make very good grades while he was here. Is this true?
Well, in fact, he flunked out at one point and had to come back again and never graduated.
Oh, he didn't?
No, I don't think Fitzgerald ever received a degree. He went into the Army in 1917. That's where he met Zelda Sayer, his future wife. He came back to Princeton to visit his old friends, Edmund Wilson, who later became the great critic, and especially John Peel Bishop, the poet, who figures in his first book, This Side of Paradise.
この東部の名門校プリンストン大学が輩出いたしました、各界に貢献をいたしました人物はおびただしいわけでありまして、ノーベル賞受賞者学者の数、それから、卒業生の中から何人もアメリカ合衆国大統領を出しているということ、マディソンホールの名前を残したマディソンもその通りでありますね。何人も他におります。その中で今週フィッツジェラルドを取り上げるというのはそれなりの意味があるんでありまして、このフィッツジェラルドというアメリカらしいこの1920年代の代表的な作家の一人にまでのし上がっていきますフィッツジェラルドはプリンストンのことを実によく描いているんですね。彼の初め出世作となりましたThis Side of Paradise、 楽園のこちら側と一般的に日本で訳されております。これは1920年であります。ちょうどリアリズムの時代、ヘミングウェイやフォークナーが台頭してくるあの時代、ヨーロッパの第一次世界大戦の後ガートルード・スタインなんていう人のサロンに集まってみんながお酒を飲んで機嫌を上げてたようなああいう時代であります。その中で中西部出身のフィッツジェラルドが東部に憧れてかっこいい生活をしたい、プリンストンっていうのは素晴らしいなと入ってきて目を見張って東部白人社会の輝きに満ちた伝統の素晴らしさを見ていたプリンストン大学関係者のこのフィッツジェラルドはそれを作品に書いたというわけでありますね。しかし番組の中にはちょっと出てきておりませんけどヘムゲンあたりからはフィッツジェラルドは単なるスタイリストだと、ファッションとして小説を書いただけだなんていう評価を得たりしておりましたですね。さあ後半も続いてフィッツジェラルドを見てみましょう。
Professor, it seems somewhat ironic that Fitzgerald's career took a downturn with his alcoholism. Do you think that affected his later writing style?
I think they did, and during the 30s, as you know, he had great difficulty writing, and in that work, which was published posthumously, The Crack-Up, well, actually it was published part of it during his lifetime, he talks about the disintegration of his career. And, of course, alcohol played a role in that, as it did in the lives of most American writers. But I think also Fitzgerald may never have fully grown up and tried to live throughout his life the style that he established here at Princeton. There's an anecdote, which I believe to be true, of Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda in a taxicab in New York when he's at the height of his success in the early 20s, and Fitzgerald suddenly starts crying because, as he said, I knew I would never be that happy again. And I think if you're as fascinated with youth as Fitzgerald was and idealize it, then the process of growing older becomes a tragic process.
Yes. Do you think this is also a comment on the Jazz Age, the seeking out of youth and the romantic and not looking towards the future to
Very
make
much
any...
so. In fact, the 20s and the 1960s in America have certain similarities in that both were decades where youth was idealized, where energy was idealized, and there was something almost inherently self-destructive in that kind of atmosphere. But of course what really ended the Jazz Age was the great economic depression that hit not just America, but the entire world in 1929-30, and suddenly brought social realities home to everyone.
Right. It's been approximately 60 years since he wrote This Side of Paradise. His first edition sold out in 24 hours.
Right.
60 years later, what is Fitzgerald's continuing appeal?
Well, I think part of it is the public image, the image of Fitzgerald, the writer, not the writing itself. That's still attractive. The fact that there are biographies written over and over again, that young people read them and think of Fitzgerald as a writer and not just the producer of certain books. On the other hand, if you take a longer view, I think his value in American literature is established not so much by his first highly romantic novel about Princeton, This Side of Paradise, but by The Great Gatsby, which is his major work, and the short stories that he wrote during the 20s and early 30s. In some sense, he is the stylist of 20th century American fiction. And in many ways, I think he's probably the most important fiction writer of the first half of this century. He and Faulkner, between them, would share that quality.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How long have you been a member of Cottage Club?
Oh, about 9 months now.
So you're a junior or a senior?
I'm a junior.
And how is it being a member of Cottage?
Well, I like a lot. You know, we've got a good atmosphere, a lot of good friends join the club with me, and pretty much happy with my choice.
Did you know that Scott Fitzgerald was a member here?
I knew that about a week ago when I was reading a book, and it was brought to my attention by other members of Cottage. But before that, no, it hasn't really been something that's been in my mind.
Do a lot of the members know about this, do you think?
Probably. It's because the other guys were talking about it, and that's how I found out. But it's not a topic that we really raise that often.
Why are you all dressed in coat and tie? Is this a regulation here?
No, it's not. All the people in coat and ties are members of the football team. We're going to go up to Colgate this morning.
Okay, thank you.
We're here today with Dr. William Joyce. Hello, Dr. Joyce. Could you introduce yourself to us, please?
Well, I'm Bill Joyce, Associate University Librarian for Rare Books and Special Collections in the Princeton University Library. And I guess we'll be talking about Scott Fitzgerald this afternoon.
Yes, we have quite a few photographs in front of us. If you could sort of point them out to us and give us a background on them.
Okay, well, here is this larger portrait is of Scott Fitzgerald in the late 1930s. I believe this was taken by Carl Van Vechten, who is a very famous New York photographer. And then ranging around the table here is a younger Fitzgerald, obviously, taken as a youth in Minnesota, where he was born and reared. The second is a family portrait of Scott Fitzgerald, his wife Zelda, and their daughter Scotty, Frances Scott Fitzgerald. And then next to that is a photograph of Zelda Fitzgerald.
When she was quite young.
When she was a young flapper from the 20s. And then finally a picture of Scott Fitzgerald writing at his desk. And I believe that may have been from the Hollywood phase of his career.
I see. And the Princeton University has a great holding of Fitzgerald's papers and manuscripts. Could you begin to show us the scrapbook that we have in front of us here?
By all means. This scrapbook contains a variety of early photos and memorabilia. Here is an original sketch of Fitzgerald as a young man, written as a youth in Minnesota, and he originally aspired to be a playwright. And we, as a matter of fact, published a book of his plays written when he lived in St. Paul as a teenager in Minnesota.
So that was never actually published when he was alive?
No, they were written when he was a teenager, so they were never published and barely performed.
How did the readers react to that? I guess, present-day readers.
Well, Fitzgerald generates a great deal of interest, and that book has sold very well. It was edited and published maybe 15 or 20 years ago now, and we still sell copies of that on a regular basis.
I see.
Here we have some early invitations and listings of Fitzgerald in his early plays when they were performed in Minnesota. And this is a report card.
Is this from Princeton?
This is from Princeton University, and Fitzgerald was, I think we would say, someplace between an indifferent and poor student. He failed a number of courses. He seems to have done well in Latin and English and physics. But mathematics appeared to be a particular problem to him, as it is to some of us. Moving through the scrapbook, we have here a series of dance cards. Here's one, The Dances and My Partners, the name Scott Fitzgerald.
What were these dance cards from? Why is this so important?
Well, it's a record of his early life and his socialization, especially in Minnesota. He was from a relatively prosperous family in St. Paul, and they had a very active social life, and I believe that it has a very formative influence on his later development as a writer.
I see.
Then moving later into the scrapbook, we have a letter written to his father from a camp for boys in Ontario, written when he was 11 years old. And he writes, "Dear Father, I received the St. Nicholas today, and I am ever so much obliged to you for it." St. Nicholas was a magazine that was very popular among young boys.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see there's a letter to Dear Mom also here.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, this is a classic letter from a youth to his parent. He's asking for money.
That doesn't change.
No, I don't think so. And then moving still further back into the scrapbook, we have here is a Triangle Club presentation. That's the Princeton University Student Theater Group. Mm-hmm. And here they're performing The Evil Eye in Princeton on Monday, December 20th, 1915. And this is a photograph of Scott Fitzgerald dressed as a woman. The reason why he's dressed as a woman was because Princeton was an all-male institution, and when performing theatricals, of course, they had parts for women.
Right.
And some of the students would have to dress in that way, and that was called cross-dressing. And there's a very active tradition of that on campus.
So the audience, though, was co-ed, of course.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And on extraordinary occasions, I understand that they did actually use women for some of the parts.
I see.
But the convention was that the men would perform them.
Mm-hmm.
さていかがでしたか。大学構内に残っておりますフィッツジェラルドゆかりの、遺品といいますか記念品、英語ではこれはメモラビリアと呼んでおりますけれども、それらを見ることができました。中には若者らしく今も昔も変わらない母親に宛てた借金のいやいやお小遣いを送れという催促の手紙などもあったようであります。さて作家としてのフィッツジェラルドの評価ということでありますけれども、彼のおそらく後世に残っていく作品を一つ挙げるとなれば、批評家の一致しているところは1925年の「The Great Gatsby」という作品、これは映画化されてもおりますね。これだろうということであります。最初の楽園のこちら側「This Side of Paradise」が20年でありますから5年後の作品ということであります。これによって、プリンストン名士のフィッツジェラルド、最も彼はこの大学は落第して卒業してないなんていう新しい事実も語られておりましたですね。さて、この自堕落的といいますか破滅型のこの日本語で言いますと分子という感じのこのフィッツジェラルド、この気だるいようなジャズエイジという時代の雰囲気を反映いたしまして、この都会的なセンスの中でちょっと大敗の匂いがちょっぴり漂ってくる、その中でむせび泣くようなジャズのソロが聞こえてくるといったような感覚を背負った文学の世界を作り出しますが、数年後にはご存知の大恐慌の中で、アメリカ社会全体が経済恐慌に落ち込んでまいります。それによってフィッツジェラルドの時代は終わったというべきなのでしょうか。さあ、これでプリンストンもおしまいとなりました。
この番組は扶養グループの提供でお送りします。
アメリカニュージャージー州プ プリンストン。超ウルトラ頭脳を持った一人の日本人の出現がアメリカの古き良き伝統を受け継いだプリンストン大学を今大きく揺さぶっている。地元の新聞は象牙の塔の救世主と書き立て、プリンストンの活性化に町を挙げて期待をかけている。200年の歴史を誇る名門プリンストン大学。シュルツ国務長官、ベーカー財務長官、アイア国家など、とりわけ最近の日米貿易摩擦をめぐる立役者にプリンストン大学出身者がなぜか多い。ブルックシールズも学ぶキャンパスの美しさはアメリカ随一。全寮制で学部の 1,2 年生は寮生活を義務付けられている。20年前に初めて世論に押されて女子の入学を許可した保守的な大学でもある。今は男女共学である。久志48歳。コンピューターの神様と言われている男がビジネス社会から日本人でありながらプリンストン大学の工学部長に抜擢された。アメリカの大学史上初めての出来事、華麗なる転身である。就任して4ヶ月、早くもプリンストンのドンと噂されつつある。3人兄弟の三男坊。実家は東京高円寺の布団屋。小学生時代に英才教育を受け、高校時代すでに大学院生のやる微積分、行列式をマスターしていた街道。プリンストンの一等地、1000坪以上もある敷地にマサエさんと夫婦2人だけの優雅な生活。だが子供がいないことだけがいささか寂しい。せめて家にお金をかけるのが最大の楽しみである。休みの日に自分でペンキを塗る、芝を刈る、小林さんのストレス解消法である。
Okay, hi Josh. Good afternoon.
27歳の時、プリンストン大学留学、史上最短時間での博士号を取得。プリンストンの教授陣を唖然とさせた。専門はコンピューターネットワーク技術、超 LSI、信号検出理論と幅広い。ニューヨークの世界最大のコンピューターメーカーで通信理論の研究からマネージメント畑へと小林さんは独自に道を切り開いてきた。
Concerning how to improve public relations.
I think one of the most critical things that we have to think about is, given the fact that we are a very small staff, it's excellent when we can build on strong programs that are already in place.
Yeah, but also we'd like to pursue that George's idea to invite some of the very distinguished alumni in a fewer number, like 3 or 4 people at a time.
I still have a few pieces.
マイルドでソフト。技術力とマネージメントのバランス感覚を保つ。これが小林さんの経営哲学である。
His English is excellent. If for some reason he does not understand the terms because the terms are new to him, because they relate to Princeton or they relate to this particular expressions that we use here, he asks. But he, first of all, is very, very smart. And secondly, has had much experience. All over the world, he's very cosmopolitan.
I find that he is a very hard-working man. I have a lot of respect for him.
I'm very glad to have that reassurance because it's not in a strong position with us, and I want to
I don't want to lose what little momentum we have.
In a camp of the University of Humanities side, fellowships. We feel that the first-year graduate student for PhD ought to have more university support.
Well, there are several things I'm interested in. I wish that we could even do more on the side of helping people be teachers.
85年度工学部の研究予算が22億4000万円。大学のトップマネジメントを預かる工学部長であるからには、大学と世界中の企業とのつながりを公正に維持し、全てに責任を取ろうとするのが小林さんの姿勢である。予算の使われ方を話し合うマル秘事項のトップシークレット、大学の経営に関わる重要な会議である。この道、工学部から大学キャンパスの中心ナッソーホールまで歩いて10分、1日に4往復から5往復する日もある。ボーエン総長は工学部の充実を打ち出している。小林さんは今後5年から10年の間、ボーエン総長の片腕として企業内で鍛え抜かれた文字通り実践的な腕力を発揮することになる。人材スカウト、ヘッドハンティングはアメリカの専売特許。彼はそれを他人に依頼するのではなく、自ら陣頭指揮を取ってあらゆる人間にインタビューし、自らのスタッフを集める。
And with regards to raising fund for the new computer science building, we certainly would like to discuss with you and alumnus and other key people for a possibility of seeking fund in Japan.
Yes. First, the development of a new plan for strengthening what is already an excellent school in carefully chosen areas. Second, recruitment of new faculty members, students, and assistance in finding the funds, the resources that we will need to turn our hopes into realities.
毎年秋、プリンストン大学のフットボールが行われる日、政界、財界、スポーツ、芸能、アメリカのあらゆる分野で活躍する卒業生たちが集まる。他のアイビーリーグ、ハーバード、エール、コロンビアなどより結束は固い。この日、超ウルトラ頭脳の小林さんも少し気が重かった。対米20年にもかかわらず、彼にはフットボールのルールがさっぱりわからないからだ。アイビーリーグ伝統の一戦である。
So it's about 4 to go.
4 to go.
49 is the placement of the ball. Okay?
But 49
49
plus...
yeah. It has nothing to do with pass. Forget about that number. That tells you where the ball is on the field. The distance they have to go is from 49 to...
Minus 4 is 45.
Yeah.
Okay. But how do you determine 45? Because of the last
it was on the
original
35,
side.
10 years classes.
の得点に沸く観衆。何が起こったのかときょとんとしている小林さん。こんな人も珍しい。
今のはなしだね。
天真爛漫、野暮天、大学、世間音痴の純粋万葉。天才の行動はいつの時代も凡人には謎である。バンカーを砂場とより平気で歩いていく。こだわらないというか、どこかただものではない。
Club do the work, not you.
Yeah.
Just the club swing nice and easy.
So I'm using too much muscle.
Yes, you're using much too much
muscle. Where is my ball? That's the best hit of today. Ah, こんだけど今度砂に入っちゃったよ。そう。サンドエッジ？
バンカー入ってるから。これ点々のやつかりました。
あ、そうです。
砂にソールつけちゃいけないです。
え？つけちゃいけないの？
バンカーはね、ノータッチだ。
あ、そうなの。今違反になるしじゃん。ああ。いや。Too much. Good. Ah.
この日初めてのカップイン。
Much better than expected. Yes. あ、こんなもんでしょ。これが上手にできたらから奇跡でね。全然練習してないんだから。
2年一昔と言われるほど最先端技術の市場の変化は目まぐるしい。的確なマーケティング戦略、企業と大学の研究テーマのすり合わせで大学の近くに企業を誘致する。超ウルトラ頭脳と20年間の企業体験で培ったマネジメント能力を買われた小林さんの腕の見せ所である。
Company with high quality in research and development program.
Right.
We participate in that Forrestal campus activities. Development.
Exactly.
Right.
Good.
So that's something I'd like to
yes,
discuss over the next few months.
Okay. The experience recently is that not only are there American companies, but also foreign companies who might want to locate there.
Right. But we have proposed this photonics technology, but we consider this is just the initial step to enlarge our program on material science in general as a inter-university effort, not just the School of Engineering, but across the department. And that's one of the key areas we like to pursue. The other areas which Princeton should be interested more aggressively is in the area of manufacturing research.
ニューヨークとフィラデルフィアを結ぶ国道1号線沿いに広がるフォレスタルセンター。プリンストン大学が土地と人材を、企業が施設と資金を出してハイテクベンチャーを育成する。これがプリンストン大学の企業誘致フォレスタルセンターの構想である。シリコンバレーを追い越せの合言葉のもと、 エレクトロニクス、バイオテクノロジー、新素材といった先端技術産業を軸に21世紀の新しい都市づくりを目指している。センターには現在世界から50の企業が進出している。人間に近づき追い越すまでになった頭脳、スーパーコンピューター。コンピューター設計の基本的な考え方はプリンストン大学で誕生している。プリンストン大学を筆頭にマサチューセッツ工科大学、コロラド大学などアメリカの頭脳13大学の共同研究センターである。アメリカでは大学と企業の金銭的結びつきはことのほか強い。プリンストン大学の研究資金のかなりの額もこれら企業の援助で賄われている。シーメンスは大学院生1人につき年400万円、その4人分の寄付をしている。また応用科学の研究室は企業の中に作り、学生や教授が企業側と共同研究することも珍しくない。リポソムは人工のバイオ細胞に薬を詰め込み、患部に直接長時間薬を浸透させる画期的な研究に成功した。
And as the university and these small fledgling businesses become better interrelated and better coordinated, there's some work of really worldwide importance that can be brought to fruition. And that's going to make his job and ours more rewarding and more exciting.
The industrial experience, which is nowadays necessary for a dean in an academic environment, because academia cannot work alone but has to work with industry, and I think that experience that he has is very, very important. And thirdly, of course, the fact that he has now been in Japan for quite some time, where the technology has been brought up to very high levels of proficiency, all of these things are very important, and we really are looking forward to a very, very close cooperation with him and the university.
どうぞ先にコーヒー
ある日、日本の大手科学系企業がプリンストンを訪れた。2度目の訪問である。円高を反映し、日本での研究をプリンストン大学に委託できないかというのである。アメリカに進出する日本の企業にとって小林さんは頼りになる存在だ。
プリンストンのナプキン。
この最初のトピック、最初のプログラムのところで、はい、フォトニクスの説明も入れていただけますか。
プリンストンのこの分野におけるアクティビティ、大体今30名ぐらいのプロフェッサーになるわけですけども、スタッフ大学院を入れるとさらに90名ぐらいの人間が何らかの意味でフォトニクスに関する研究をしていると。プリンストンの場合はポリマーマテリアル、ポリマーっていうのは日本語に訳すと何て言うんですかね、高分子化学ですか。その分野ではかなり著名な人が昔からおったわけですけども、でポリマーのマテリアルもこれからそのバイオテクノロジー、バイオマテリアル、バイオポリマー
研究内容は企業内に取得することはない。例外なく科学雑誌に公表する。プリンストンにははっきりした研究ポリシーがある。大学と企業の不必要な癒着は許されない。
大学と会社の違いというものはありましても、本質的にはそのマネジメントの仕事っていうのは自分でなくてですね、人を通して仕事をまとめてやっていくと。ですから、日本でいうそのコンセンサスというようなことも大学において非常に大事ですし、各学科の先生方のですね、興味のあるその分野をうまく取りまとめて、それでなおかつ 産業界とのつながりを立てるとか、それから新しいカリキュラムを組むと、そういう方向へ、それぞれの先生のモチベーションを持っていくと、そういうフィロソフィーにおいては大学であってもから会社であってもですね、本質的な問題だと思います。
どうも、いらっしゃい、久しぶり。どうぞお入りください。大変だったでしょ。
東大工学部時代の同級生川原春夫さん、2年ぶりの再会である。単身赴任の川原さんはスペースシャトルの燃料電池の電源を研究開発するハイテク合弁会社の社長さんである。
あ、そうじゃあもうずっとドライブ。
どうですかこっち。 私もね、ご覧の通りまだ落ち着いてないんですよ。でもすっかり 電気屋さん入れたりね。
小林先生の今の現在の地位っていうのは川原さんから見ても大変な地位じゃないですかね。
そうでしょうね。私もびっくりしましたしね。やっぱりなんていうのかな、アメリカの中で本当の意味の指導的な立場になるっていうのはやっぱり大変なことだと感じますね、僕らもね。やっぱり一番難しく感じるのはビジネスの会話やね、ビジネスの付き合いじゃなくて、例えばその食事をしてる時のね、なんとない会話ね、 授業は分かってもね、あるいは仕事のディスカッションができても、ランチタイムとかね、パーティーに呼ばれて、その話に加わるってね、やっぱりかなりの難しさがあったですけどね。知らないうちにやっぱり19年20年もいる間にだんだんその辺は問題なくなったですけども、それでもやっぱりいろいろこちらの文化的なバックグラウンドとかそういうことが十分じゃないってことはよく感じますね。 そうそうそう。だからやっぱりこれから本当のやっぱり国際人になるには、例えばこっちでね、そうですね、中学高校時代を過ごすとね、本当のネイティブな言葉なんだそうですね。小学校で忘れちゃうらしいですね。小学校だけで帰っちゃうと、で中学高校を過ごすと大体定着するみたいですよ。でそれ以上から来ると今度全然ダメっていうかね、全然っていうとなんだけども、要するに ハンディキャップがあるね。 そうそうそう、ネイティブの言葉にならないっていうかね、なんかそんなことみたいですね。だからたくさん親と一緒に来て、そういう子どもたちが育って、そういう要するに本当のネイティブな気持ちの分かる会話のできる人たちが増えてくるっていうことがね、これから大変大事なことだと思いますけどね。
企業のトップマネジメントの実践を引っ提げて象牙の塔の改革に乗り込んだ小林久氏。今21世紀に向けてアメリカの大学と日本企業との関わりを占う重要なポストにいる。彼の存在は本格的な海外展開が始まったばかりの日本企業の牽引力となるだけでなく、外国社会と日本企業、日本人の付き合い方の未来にわたる良きお手本となるだろう。
群馬県館林市の病院に勤める中島秀夫医師。脳外科医として厳しい日常を送る傍ら、玄人裸足のある